Hi guys, MTech here, we're back. We're in my solar powered work shed. Gonna do some off-grid tests with the cold electricity generator. That's what I'm calling it. It converts normal AC power into cold electricity through this network here that I made. This additional network right here is not part of the micro hyper efficient 120 volt AC inverter that was added by me. That's my invention. It automatically detects your load and injects the correct amount of negative resistance into it to make things more efficient. We're going to be doing some long duration tests until failure. So here's a good look at everything again. Super small, super simple, fits in the palm of your hand. I'm in the shed. I'm in my solar powered work shed because we're out of the bright sunlight. You can see the test better. And we also have this ground system set up. This very in-depth ground system. This ground rod is separate from all those. I'm going to try running the load by passing the power through the earth and see if it becomes more efficient. So we'll do some tests until the system fails. Nice sunny day outside, very bright. Good look at the shed. No form of power anywhere. So, alright, we're going to begin. Sometimes it has trouble turning on, but it should kick on nonetheless. And what's interesting is the circuitry here is actually a dead short circuit. But the cold electricity doesn't seem to care for that because it's in resonance. It's in a hyper form of resonance. And you can tap a load off of it. So where you draw from is here and down here. This inductor network makes things more efficient. Turn the clamp meter on. Clamp meter is the best for reading power flow when the device is on. We'll put this guy right here. This is going to be a long video, so we're going to see what happens. I'm not sure why the current meter is reading power when the system is not even on. So, but anyway, we'll switch it on. And it has trouble turning on at first. Sometimes you have to make an abrupt connection to it to get it to kick on. Or if you hold a 14 volt power source to it, it will kick on. I think it has something to do with the battery circuitry, that it doesn't like what I'm doing, but I'm not doing anything crazy. Come on. Should eventually kick on. If I just tap an external 14 volts to it, it'll kick on no problem, but I didn't bring that with me. So we're on. And it's important to note when it's on. Drawing 3.50 amps. The radiant energy does flicker as it auto-tunes to the load. So basically what occurs is that auto-tuning negative resistance injection senses our load from the inverter, and it tries to cancel out the positive resistance with the correct amount of negative resistance injection, and nothing gets hot when the load is operating. So you could say it's a cold electricity output. We can basically get as much cold electricity as we want. And this is going to be 40 times 3 will be the load. And normally this 150 watt pure sine wave inverter can't run a 150 watt halogen bulb, but I'll show that running too. Ooh, that light bulb blew up. So sometimes light bulbs blow up from the radiant energy. That one just blew up. Good thing I've got extras. Good look at the flicker. Hopefully the camera can capture that. It does give off a buzzing sound. You'll have to forgive me. I have horrible allergies to pollen. I can barely breathe sometimes. So the system has adjusted. Gives off small amounts of wireless power. We will be running the system until failure. You can see how everything's connected. Very bright. These are at full intensity, full heat. I'll get some extra leads now. We can see we're drawing current from the battery. So what's occurring is we have a 12-volt battery powering up a very efficient AC inverter. The AC inverter gets turned into cold electricity, and in an auto-tuning fashion, it injects the correct amount of negative resistance into our load to run it very efficiently. And in theory, the way you would get free energy from this is you would pass one leg of the output through the earth ground and pull power back out of the earth at the right frequency, and you should get free power, but that's all speculation and has to be tested. So we're going to run everything until failure. This is going to be a long video. That's our current draw from the battery. Now I will get these two leads. The maximum output on this is about 200 watts. There's about a sweet spot with the system. If I draw more than 200 watts, the main sidac here gets hot, which is the switching component where the conversion of the energy takes place. So our conventional AC power, due to the rapid switching and negative resistance injection from the sidac and avalanche transistor, that's where the energy is being gated or switched from normal energy into the cold electricity. And if we draw too much from it, there will be heat generation because we'll overload it. So what I'm going to show here now is this bulb coming to full intensity. So I will disconnect the other incandescents. So now I will hook up the halogen bulb. And I'm filming one-handed, doing everything on my own. This should kick on. Sometimes it needs an external 14 volts to kick on to get it to start. Yeah, it doesn't even want to kick on, but if I had another 14-volt battery with me and just tapped these input leads, it would come on full power, no problem. I should have brought another 14 battery with me to do that. Oh, and our connection came off too. Probably from the heat. So I'm going to try and max out. Yeah, that's very annoying. There's something with the built-in battery BMS that doesn't like turning on. That's what it boils down to. It's not that it doesn't like what I'm doing. It's something with the BMS being irritating in the battery. So anyway, we will hook up the light bulbs again. Everything goes wrong when you film, right? So I'll hook this up. Should get this guy to kick on with just a tap. Get the tap right, it will kick on. Because this battery has an oversensitive BMS and it's a pain in the ass. Come on. God, that's so annoying. The way to fix that would be to put an inductor in series here to trick the BMS by adding more inductance and resistance to the line, because somehow it thinks there's a short circuit because my leads are so short, but there's not a short circuit. And it will eventually kick on. Come on. And the correct diode, believe it or not, in series here, right here will cause it to turn on, but the diode will melt if it's not rated for the current. So this is getting really annoying. I might have to cut the video, go back to my house, okay, we're on. As long as we have it on, we should be alright. As long as I don't overload it somehow. Alright, so what you're seeing is the bulb flickering. The reason the bulb is flickering is because we have an inverter circuit here that's very efficient. It outputs 120 volts AC, and as you see, this network I made and added, it consists of a capacitor network, inductor network, and a sidac network, S-I-D-A-C, sidac, and 2 avalanche transistors in a pair. And what this network does is the sidacs rapidly fire during the 2 peaks of the AC wave, the upper and lower peak of the AC wave. The sidacs fire and conduct very briefly, charging up the capacitor and inductor network, and creating a conversion of the power from normal AC power to a type of cold electricity that can run very substantial loads. And it creates this cold electricity conversion process from our components here. And it's supposed to be auto-tuning. It does flicker sometimes. It struggles with light loads. The heavier the load you put on it, up to 200 watts, the more stable it becomes. And when loads are running, you hear them vibrating. So basically, the circuit is auto-sensing, injects the correct amount of negative resistance to cancel out the positive resistance inherent with the load, and it'll run. It'll run powerful loads. And the flicker is due to the auto-tuning of the circuitry, and nothing gets hot. Like, I'm touching this, nothing is even warm. Everything after the negative resistance switching always stays cold unless you draw more than 200 watts from it. And these are pretty thin components. You can see how thin that is. Thin connections. Normally those inductors could not handle 200 watts through them with how thin the wiring is. That's stone cold. And again, completely, you can pick it up, it's portable. So we will run it till failure. We're drawing 6 amps now. Right now the cold energy does seem to draw power. As you draw more cold energy, you'll draw more power from the battery. I'm not quite sure at the ratio. I'll have to calculate the ratio and plug it into like an AI math program. But what everyone believes should occur is if you send one leg of the power through a heavy earth connection and then have another separate heavy earth connection to draw the power back out of to run your load, and somehow you lag the phase angle by 90 degrees relative to the earth, you should in theory get free loadless power to your loads, because you're pulling the cold electricity out of the earth, which is technically a dielectric longitudinal form of power that has no magnetic component to it. So there's what we're drawing. Another thing too is if I put the clamp meter here, we can't read current flow through the bulbs. Put the light on. It'll say that, but that's obviously not right because we're drawing much more than that to light those bulbs at full intensity. So this thing gets a little glitchy too, just being near the system. So the system has a couple hiccups, being the leads are too short and it doesn't like to turn on, but that can be solved easily. As you see, power output. Can't really quite read it here from the cold energy. And the only heat generation will be on the conventional side. Once we create that cold energy and we inject, and the auto tuning negative resistance circuit injects the correct amount of negative resistance, there's no heat in these components. There's no heat here, no heat here. There'll be no heat generation unless we draw 200 watts and we overload it. That's the limit of the little switches and the little transistor. And you can even hear a buzz to it too. When the radiant energy or the cold electricity is powering the bulbs, you will hear a faint buzz. It gives off a buzz. I'm not sure if you can hear that. So we'll let that go until it dies, and then we'll calculate our efficiency. And we're running a full, each bulb's 40 watts. So 120 watts right there, we're going. We can calculate the time soon. Clamp this again, get a reading. And I can actually draw more power from this. I'm going to add another bulb too. Should have set this up before the video, but didn't really think of it. Good spot would probably be here. It's got to hook up to it somehow. I think that's an LED too, so it's good to show that it can run just about anything. Oh, if I can connect it. Here we go. Full intensity. And the LED is a non-linear load, and it actually enhanced the system further. As you see, the heavier of a load you put on this type of radiant energy system, the more efficient it becomes. Here's our current draw. It's interesting that that light bulb increases us by 2 amps. I have another incandescent I can hook up. Maybe this one. And I gotta make sure I don't overload the switches here. I can't pull more than 15 amps from it. Ooh, that LED is hot. So with this type of cold radiant energy, you can send it through extremely small conductors. It's, I guess you would call it the true form of electricity. It's very efficient. The only heat that would be generated from it would be when it's doing actual work in the loads. So that's lit now too. Full power. And we're right at the limit of what it can do. Around 14 amps. There'll be a lot of heat in that switch. That switch is only rated for 20 amps. And this side would be experiencing a strain as we pull power from the battery and then convert it into cold electricity at our network we added here. And yeah, that's full intensity, no dimness. I'm not seeing any form of dimming at all. Give you a step back and look at everything. We're going to let this thing run until failure. And we're doing this long duration test in my work shed that's isolated from all forms of AC power. And again, this system right here is not free energy the way it is. It's just more efficient. To, in theory, make it free energy, you would have to take one leg of the power, pass it through a heavy earth connection, and the other leg would run your load between the opposite leg and another heavy earth connection. And you would have to lag the phase angle somehow of the earth's natural electrical background by tuning it. And that's how you would somehow get the free power into the system without putting a load on your driving battery. At least in theory. So that's how it looks. We're going to run it all the way until failure. And we're probably, I can't put a watt meter on the cold electricity output because it can't read the power. It's a high frequency. A watt meter won't work at all. Basically, the correct way to use this power, if you really wanted to use it, would then be to convert the cold electricity into a DC that charges another battery that then runs an inverter in a clean way. But the problem is, I can't use a full bridge rectifier with the cold electricity. You can't use a full bridge rectifier with it. You have to use 1 or 2 diodes. So that's what we're drawing. Well, I'm 21 minutes now. And you're not supposed to draw more than 150 watts from this battery. Just that one little battery. So that's pretty impressive, huh? What that little battery's doing with the cold electricity injection. And for anyone who thinks it's magic or crazy stuff's going on, no, it's dead simple. The circuit has to follow Occam's razor. What occurs, like I said, 12-volt battery, 6 amp hour, Lifey PO4 gets stepped up to 120 volts AC, pure sine. This network, this negative resistant network that I added is my invention. It came to me in a crystal clear dream. And what it does with sidacs and 2 avalanche transistors in parallel and an LC network, what it does is it auto-senses your resistive load you run, and it injects the correct amount of negative resistance into whatever load you're running to make it as efficient as possible and cancel out most of the positive resistance. It's not perfect. There's still some amount of loss. It won't run forever. It'll eventually die down, but it is very efficient. And like I said, the way you would get free energy from it in theory, you pass one leg of the power through an earth connection. The other leg of power runs your load through an isolated earth connection, and you have to lag the phase angle of the power somehow to get free loadless power delivered to your load. The earth would basically be the transducer that gives you the free power in a dielectric longitudinal fashion, in theory. So we're still at full blaring intensity here. No degradation. These loads are at full intensity. We're going to run this until failure. Very good test to do. And I'm talking a lot to tell you everything going on. Dead simple circuit. About to sell these guys too. Everything I told you, you can easily build it, replicate it on your own. It's very simple. See if we can see a frequency on the scope, which you can't. It'll come up as a static blur line on the scope. You can't get a frequency lock on it, on the power. So if I can connect this over here somewhere. But yeah, you can't get a frequency lock on the power. It would appear as a vibrating static line because we're switching at such a rapid frequency at such a minimal time period, the scope can't lock on to it. Nope. That's how the waveform looks. Very abrupt spikes. And sometimes it'll even glitch the oscilloscope and shut it off. So our waveform is definitely not 17 or 32 hertz. It's a very abrupt spike. There's almost no wave. It's just an abrupt on-off switch. There's not so much a waveform here. It's an abrupt on-off switch. And the switching is the negative resistance injection piggybacked onto the AC signal. And again, are you not impressed with what that little circuit is doing? How efficient it is? I don't know how long we're going on now. I'll have to check the video, but those are still at full intensity. I can feel entire heat from this area. Drawing 14.35 amps. We're going until failure. So we're just going to go all the way until failure. That's how it looks. Good view around everything. Under everything for the curious. And when this video's, or when this is done running the load, I'm going to pick everything up and show you everything. Which I already did before the video started, but I'll do it again anyway. And we know this couldn't run the heat light because we didn't have a jump start. All this needs to run the heat light is just a 14 volt jump start on the input for a second, and it will run it. So I'll start putting all this stuff back. Don't need the scope anymore. I showed you guys what the waveform looks like. It's unmeasurable. The waveform looks like just a spiked line. In fact, I'd even like to pick up this table and walk around with it on video. Just disconnect these ground connections that we're not using. I was going to do a test where I pass one leg of the power through the earth ground and another leg through the other earth ground, but I don't think I'm going to do that in this video. I'm not sure yet. And I'll try and move the table for you guys. Show you everything is completely movable and dead simple. So I can move this wherever I want. Full power still. Even move this further towards the back of my shed. So by me dragging it, I'm showing you there's not some kind of like weird hidden wires anywhere. So I dragged it even further away now. Holding steady still at 14.29, 14.30. Going on 30 minutes of the video. Absolutely incredible. That's just the amp meter beeping saying it's about to shut off to save power. Have this EMF detection meter too. So really, at the end of the day, Eric Dollard was absolutely correct. The form of power we use, being electromagnetic, is by its very definition, loss. The correct form of power to use would be cold electricity, which is a negative resistant rapid discharge on-off, an abrupt DC conversion of AC power into an abrupt discharge that's on and off. That would have no waveform. It would look like a spike up and down. It would be called a longitudinal dielectric impulse. It is the opposite of the magnetic wave. And it's probably the most efficient way to transmit power. And this is a conversion circuit. What's occurring is, like I said, 12 volts DC stepped up to 120 volts AC from the very efficient inverter board, and our circuitry here takes that and converts it to cold electricity in an auto-tuning way to the load. So it's really dead simple, and it can't be complicated, because if it's complicated, it won't work. It'll have too much resistance, and you'll just be spinning your wheels. This stuff has to be as simple as possible and follow Occam's razor. So I'm going to be selling these guys soon. Have to forgive me, I can barely breathe, horrible allergies. And these things are so simple. And I was hesitant to show it too, because of how dead simple it is. And this is going to be a nice long video until failure, because it shouldn't run forever. It's just very efficient. It'll eventually shut off. Just want to know how long it will go for. And like I said, the key in theory to getting it to run forever will be to pass one leg of the power through a heavy earth ground, and the other leg of power, you pull the power back out of a separate earth ground into your load, and by tuning it correctly, you would get essentially free loadless power into your load. So we're still holding steady, drawing about 14.25 amps. And what's interesting is we have a 14.25 amp current draw from the battery into the inverter. And as we convert the AC power into the cold electricity, radiant power, there's no heat anywhere. And those are small transistors. There's no heat anywhere. That is a short-circuited resonant network with small components, small sidacs and small transistors, and there's no heat buildup. That side of the circuit stays stone cold. Unless you pull more than 200 watts from it, then you overload the switching and it would generate heat. But there's a sweet spot at about 150 watts where the negative resistant components don't generate any heat at all from running the load. So we're going until failure. And those bulbs are still at full intensity. That is just crazy. Good look again out under everything. I dragged that table so no one can say I have a hidden wire anywhere. And plus, I'm in an electrically dead shed. This is a solar shed with no AC power to it. In fact, here's one of the old solar panels. These ones are dead. They're just stored here. A few days ago, I think 2 days ago, I did the same exact test and had this table set up over there by the garden dirt patch. I moved it in here because it was too bright outside, and it was a little bit dark in here, so you could see the lights come on better. Just for the hell of it, I'll drag everything again, so there can be no doubts about anything. We'll drag it pretty far. No doubts about anything. See where we dragged it from. Still full intensity. Nice long test video. Those bulbs are still at full intensity. That's impressive. The EMF meter can detect the cold energy though. I'm not sure if you can hear that buzzing. And so again, these are all 40 watt loads. 40 watt incandescent. We have 4 40 watt loads hooked up. So we're pulling about 160 watts. And I'm going to drag it back into the darkness slowly. So we're now back in the darkness where you can appreciate the light output more. Full power. That is crazy. Everything appears to be at full power. Lighting up the shed pretty good. And this is a completely electrically dead shed. And again, what's exactly occurring is the circuit creates a conversion process. We take the 12 volts, get stepped up to 120 volts AC from our very efficient inverter board. The additional circuitry I added here that hangs off the side that looks kind of funny is what I invented. It's a negative resistance injection circuit. It senses the load you're trying to run and injects the correct amount of negative resistance to try its best to cancel out the positive resistance of the load and runs it. And we just failed at the 37-minute mark. So I'll switch it off. And we ran that for quite a while. I'll disconnect everything. And we'll check for heat. Move the clamp meter. So here's what was doing all that work. Dead simple. We will check for heat. There's zero heat in any of the components at all. Zero heat. There is no heat whatsoever in the negative resistance auto-tuning LC injection circuitry. Zero heat. And these are small transistors, small sidacs, 2 avalanche transistors, 2 sets of 2 sidacs. The capacitor resonant LC network. And like I said, the reason it failed and how you would get free energy in theory is you would pass one leg of the power through the earth ground and the other leg gets pulled back out of the earth into your load, and you would have to lag the phase angle of the power somehow relative to the earth, and you should get free power to the load in theory. So that's that. Nice long video till failure. Walk around with it again. It's dead simple. Good look at it. Good look at it in the sunlight. And we'll see if we can turn it on again and run just one load. See if we can turn this guy back on. Oh, actually, I think it shut it off because the battery overheated. Yeah, I think we shut off because we drew too much power from the battery and there was overheating within the battery. And the built-in BMS in this battery stopped us from drawing power from it. I think that's why we failed in the test. This won't come on at all. In fact, if I were to put a voltmeter here, I bet I wouldn't even be able to read power from this battery, because the built-in BMS shut off the ability for us to draw power from the battery. Little bit of heat up here on the switching transistors, built into the inverter. But no, we're not even. Good thing I did bring a voltmeter out here. I'm gonna check that. So if I was a betting person, I would probably guarantee you the reason our test failed and could have gone longer is because the built-in BMS shut off us from drawing power from the battery. 12.26. No, maybe it is completely dead. Maybe I'm wrong. .26, and we started with 14 volts. But that battery is warm, so we'll see if we can get that started again. I think the BMS did shut off the ability for us to draw power from it, but no, we're not kicking on. What's weird is the inverter won't kick on at all, and that green light won't glow. Because usually if you overload the BMS on this thing, which I've seen happen before, you'll read like a weird voltage, like 3 or 4 volts or something weird. So, 12.26 volts. So that's the video. Not really sure what else there is to do for tests. We maxed out the system. I'm going to have to rewatch it and calculate how long everything took. See if there was a real efficiency gain. There should be some from the circuit. And again, that's how dead simple it is. Hold it to the light for you to see. That's the negative resistance injection part. It is an LC network that injects the correct amount of negative resistance, and it will always stay cold during operation. And the next test I do, I think, I'll bring another 14-volt battery out here that'll act as a little kickstart for a split second and show how I can run a 200-watt heat light, and that really maxes the system out. So yeah, that's that, and feel free to like, comment, subscribe, join the Patreon. I'll be selling these circuits soon as an experimental platform. Not sure on the price yet, have to figure it out. Gonna have to calculate the math of what happened and see if there's a savings. So feel free to like, comment, subscribe, join the Patreon, and yeah, thank you everybody.